Is the lure of a new life in the U.S. ruining the American economy and putting lives at risk? That's the question we're asking. Coming up, what can or should be done to curb the flow of illegal immigrants across U.S. borders? There has been an ongoing border war at the point where Mexico meets the U.S. Authorities are preparing for that battle to heat up now that the summer months are upon us. And so, too, will the thousands of illegal immigrants who are dying to get into the U.S. And I mean literally. NBC's George Lewis joins us live from the border at San Ysidro, California. George, what can you tell us?
Well, Mika, you're absolutely right about people dying to get into the United States. We had a report just over the weekend of 2 more people found dead in the Arizona desert trying to get in. We had 14 others found dead earlier this month. It's an ongoing problem. We're here at the secondary border check station where they bring vehicles in for a detailed inspection at the San Ysidro Border Crossing Center. And joining us here is Adele Fasano, who's the District Director for the Immigration Naturalization Service. I guess this is one of the impounded vehicles here, Adele. What can you tell us about it? I see some hollowed out areas here where the gas tanks should be.
Yes, this was a vehicle we intercepted with 2 individuals were placed inside these hollowed out gas tanks, and it had special hydraulic lifters to get them into the vehicle, and they actually had a breathing apparatus tied to some scuba diving
It's here in the cab of the vehicle.
Here.
If we can see, they've got a couple of tanks of compressed air that normally used for scuba diving. That sounds like a really claustrophobic thing to do, to be in those gas tanks breathing compressed air.
Extremely dangerous, and the residue fumes from the gasoline, very serious situation.
We've seen, I guess you've seen a number of ingenious ways that people try to get across the border. Let's, as we walk over to the other vehicles, maybe you can tell us about some of the ingenious things they've used.
We've seen it all. We recently found a man sewn into the seat of a vehicle. We've seen people in dashboards and the roofs of vehicles and hollowed out mattresses. We've seen what we refer to as coffin compartments with a wooden bed of a pickup truck or a camper with individuals laid inside.
What's the story on this pickup truck here?
Here we have an engine compartment. This is very common. This is supposed to be a firewall. It's a piece of plywood to protect the individuals from getting burned from the engine area. They rearranged some of the inside of the vehicle. We found 2 Chinese individuals inside this vehicle. They reported to us that they paid $58,000 to be smuggled into the United States.
$58,000, and it all came to an end here.
It all came to an end here.
And what happens to them now?
They'll be deported back to China. They have the ability to go through immigration proceedings, and if they may ultimately be removed.
Now, the overwhelming number of people you apprehend at this border who are trying to get in illegally are coming from Mexico, right? Are Mexicans.
Yes.
But how many people from other countries do you see on a yearly basis?
Well, for instance, last year we arrested 70,000 people, and only 1,000 were other than Mexican nationals. So the large majority are Mexican nationals. The predominant countries are Eastern Europe, Middle East, China, Asia, and Central and South America.
Adele Fasano, thank you very much. A very busy border here, and as you say, Mika, an ongoing war between the government agents and the people who are trying to smuggle people across.
It really is. And George, any sense of for how many that they catch, how many have gone through? Probably dozens.
Well, there's no way of saying accurately how many get away for how many are caught. The agents here at the border are telling us that they've seen decreases and increases in apprehensions. Operation Gatekeeper has been in place since 1994. A lot of the border traffic has moved out to the Arizona desert as a result of the increased enforcement here.
Amazing and so sad. NBC's George Lewis, thanks very much. George, of course, pointing out the extent that people will go to get into the U.S. It's a contentious issue, and joining us now to debate it from Phoenix, James Garcia. He is editor and publisher of PoliticoMagazine.com, a website dedicated to Latino politics, issues, and culture. And in Washington, Dan Stein, executive director of the Federation for American Immigration Reform, an organization dedicated to stopping immigration. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us. Dan, I'd like to start off with your view on the impact of illegal immigration on this country, specifically the economy.
Well, look, let's realize here that illegal immigrants come into this country in part because when they get here, they effectively are allowed to stay. Employers are not sanctioned or fined for hiring them in any meaningful way. There's no enforcement in the interior. We don't have good cooperation between the state and local governments and the Federal Immigration Service. So when aliens apply for benefits or otherwise involved in state and local activities, there's virtually no interior enforcement in this country. It's no wonder people try to get past that thin green line. We're never going to be able to control illegal immigration at the border unless we have better and more effective enforcement in the interior.
Yeah, there certainly is a mixed message going out to people outside of this country. You could get caught at the border, but if you get in, you'll get a job. And then there are the other views, because this is a contentious and controversial issue. James, in light of the coverage of people dying in their efforts to get to this country, do you think more should be done to preserve life at the border? Are border police too harsh in your view?
I think that as a general rule of thumb, the Border Patrol, the agents, are well-trained, intending to do the best job they can with the task that they have. I think the problem is the task itself. The federal government has a policy now in which it's trying to crack down on these high-volume crossing areas along the border, and it's a policy that, frankly, isn't working, period. They talk about apprehensions at these high-volume crossing points, and they tabulate them as if somehow that's reduced illegal immigration into the country. It has not. People are coming here. They'll find a way to come here. They come here, as you noted earlier, because there are jobs here for them to get. People hire them. Those people who are hiring them, in general, are not being prosecuted or punished in any way for hiring them. And so the incentive is there.
What are you saying? That since they are coming here, they will get here, there is the incentive, they should be let in? Or what's your view? Clear that up for us.
No, what I'm saying is that your point about the Border Patrol and whether or not they're maybe too heavy-handed, I think that the policy itself of trying to clamp down on these high-volume areas it just simply isn't working overall, and so there needs to be an option. There needs to be a long-term look at this and some changes at this, and the thing that's been brought up again and again, including by many of the human rights groups who are trying to help the immigrants out in the desert here in Arizona, is that there needs to be a long-range policy of allowing these workers to come here legally and to protect them and protect their rights as laborers in this country, and there is no concerted effort to do that.
Dan,
the number of visas that are given to these people is extremely limited, and it forces them to take these options.
Let's let Dan chime in on this.
Risk.
Dan, what's your reaction to that point of view?
I think that's a false solution. What we have is a schizophrenic enforcement policy that simply doesn't enforce the immigration laws of this country. The Border Patrol is doing a fantastic job with very limited resources. They treat immigrants humanely. They work to try to ensure that human rights are protected. They are asked to do an impossible job because we allow employers in this country to import cheap illegal immigrant labor and pay and ask state and local governments and people like you and me to pay the cost for education, housing, and the other training costs associated with using workers whose productivity is very limited. It's a labor subsidy. It's lining the pockets of people who influence things in this country at the expense of the people in this country who are least able to withstand it. If Vicente Fox, the president of Mexico, really wants to rebuild his economy, he will ask people who've been working in this country illegally to come back home and put the experience they've gotten working construction, farm, food processing, manufacturing, and put it to work in Mexico. The ultimate solution to illegal immigration is for both the U.S. and Mexico to share their part of the responsibility in ensuring that our borders are respected.
Well, certainly this is a foreign policy issue as well, but James, respond to some of that. He made a couple of points there, but we are taking in more than 1 million people a year. Should the U.S. be held accountable in protecting the lives of undocumented immigrants who risk their lives to break the law and come to the U.S.?
Well, I think there are two issues that have to be addressed here. One is the long term, of course, and I've addressed that. I think that there needs to be this policy of developing a way for people to come in legally to do the work that people are asking them to do. I think that's something that the Congress should be dealing with, that legislators, that the President should be dealing with. There is, of course, this more immediate and crisis situation, which literally involves the deaths of hundreds of immigrants along the U.S.-Mexico border. Most of these people are not dying because they're in clashes with Border Patrol agents, because they're involved in violent acts. They're just wandering through the desert or dying in the Rio Grande.
And if I could finish your thought, James, I want to ask a question to Dan real quickly. I mean, they're desperate to get here. In 10 seconds or less, can you understand that there is a crisis that we're dealing with firsthand?
Clearly, the Mexican government is encouraging people to come illegally by giving them survival kits instead of discouraging people from coming through the desert. Remember, when we had people crossing at high-volume checkpoints like San Ysidro, we had aliens getting hit in traffic all the time. People were dying there, too. The bottom line is we have to stop illegal immigration, and the only way to do that is through better interior enforcement. Congress has had time after time after time opportunities to get interior enforcement under control, and they haven't done it.
Well, they haven't, and at this point, we're going to have to end this conversation. We don't have enough time. This is obviously a much larger issue that we'll have to get back to. Dan Stein and James Garcia, thank you both for your insight.